So, who starts if there is any question? Yes, on the back, please, the microphone. Can go to the person in the back, please. Thank you. David, if I'm not wrong.
Hi there. I've worked with some educational institutions in New Zealand on things like student enrollments and so forth. Seeing some of the stuff here looks relatively familiar to me, but I was just wondering, when it comes to institutions across the state of Texas and in your cohorts and so forth, how much variation is there in terms of some of the ontology stuff, and is that something that could possibly form the basis of an open standard that institutions could start to align their data across?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So when I was back at MIT, I actually had a big project funded by the Department of Education in the US where we worked with community colleges. And that project, we were a little more focused on deploying an intervention in the classroom. But what was eye-opening in that project, we worked with two community colleges. One was in Massachusetts, it was just down the road from MIT, and one was in Colorado. And what I learned was that, so the community colleges are sort of managed at the statewide level, and states have very, very different approaches to sort of architecting the community colleges. And in particular, Colorado is a very centralized state where the state has worked very hard to sort of standardize courses, course names, transfer pathways. And so it turned out to be very, very easy for us to work with the Colorado Community College for that reason. Whereas in Massachusetts, it was kind of the Wild West in terms of every community college was doing its own thing, called the course different names. The pathways were not standardized. So the answer to your question is there's tremendous variability from state to state. So, you know, what does that mean? I mean, clearly, as in that experience, the more standardization there is across, the more you could start to define these ontologies and even the knowledge graph that kind of would maybe, you know, almost be a one-size-fits-all. We don't have that. This is where I'm pretty excited about some of the advances in sort of learning on graphs, you know, AI methods, which is maybe that's okay. Maybe we can move forward if we could make the process of creating the knowledge graph scalable as opposed to it taking a year of manual time. So I think that it's a great question. The more standardization there is, the easier it is to start making these foundations. But maybe this is also where, if we could get the data sorted out, right, you could learn from the data what the structure of the graph looks like and the way things are structured. Yeah.
Jess, and then Amden.
Thanks, Karen. As an ex-policymaker myself, I'm interested in the challenge you have in terms of communicating that to people that want to make changes to this graph to get some better outcomes, for example. I realize this is probably a pilot, so you guys weren't really thinking about this, but what do you think the roadmap looks like for helping someone in the education department understand, get insight from this level of complexity and the sorts of things that they could start to ask themselves about what you've created here?
Yeah, no, that's another great question. So I mentioned we had a special commissioner-directed project. The commissioner of Texas Higher Education was actually a UT faculty member who I had met, and he knew I had done a little bit of work in this area at MIT. And so we were sort of a special project. And when he and then his deputy commissioner was a real champion for this, it was amazing. So we had so much support from the top. You know, they helped facilitate getting the data over to TAC. For us doing this, we would have regular meetings with them. We would understand. They facilitated stakeholder interviews where we went and met with a lot of people so we could understand what are the kinds of questions that these policymakers are asking, and that helped us to inform what is it important to model, you know, which are the most important things. So that was incredible. Then the commissioner moved on and the deputy commissioner retired, and we sort of lost that connection and those champions. And so now the project is finished and it's just kind of languishing there. So, you know, maybe I would love to talk to you. I think that's a big part of it, right? Is it takes a champion and somebody at the top. You know, I sort of jokingly said it breaks my heart that people couldn't make money off education. Okay, so that means that a commercialization, you know, a company's not going to come in and do it. But that's not to say that we could not make money by making our education system more effective. And I think sort of coming at it from the business case perspective. And by the way, you've seen what we've been able to do. This is one graduate student, right? This is like $100,000 a year for 2 years that did this. Some relatively modest amount of resources deployed towards this problem. I think you would gain it in spades. So short answer is I don't know how to reach them. And like I said in the beginning, this is a side project for me. I have my hands full with aircraft, spacecraft, and all the other stuff we do. This is a side interest. I keep threatening one of these days when I'm done directing the Odin Institute and being a real aerospace engineer and all the other things I do, I would love to spend more time on this. I just don't know when that day is coming. But I wish somebody would pick it up. There's just so much low-hanging fruit in education. So
A person who take money out of education. I mean, I built the first e-learning company in South America 25 years ago. Low-hanging fruit, please. And if you are able to abstract graphs and subjects which are easy to model, for example, math, you can cover not a state, an entire continent.
that's right.
You just
It's like math where there's a real logical progression of classes and classes build on each other. That's right.
Yeah. Andrew.
So first of all, with due apologies to all the other speakers, this was the talk of the week so far. I think I just want to ask something that you've touched on twice already in your answers, and that's the effort required to create digital twins. You said a year of manual time for this one. Is there any guidance on what is a typical amount of time and effort to create sort of a minimum viable digital twin using the graph methods to a useful one, to a really good one? Yeah. What are we looking at?
Oh gosh, yeah. So let me not answer you. Let me answer around your question. I mean, first of all, you use the phrase minimum viable digital twin. That in itself is a really important phrase. And back to the beginning, to the National Academy's report, one of the things that we drew out in that report is a digital twin has to be fit for purpose, because in the information gathering, the year that we did of that study, we heard all kinds of things. We heard people say, a digital twin can only be a digital twin if it resolves everything down to the last nut and bolt, every single little detail, and all the tiny imperfections that David's amazing technology is capturing. We had other people say, a digital twin is only a digital twin if it runs in real time, and so it has to be simplified models. And the conclusion was no, digital twin has to be fit for purpose. So what is minimally viable? What are the decisions you need to drive? What is your baseline? One of the other things we're doing is a lot of work with MD Anderson Cancer Center and trying to bring digital twin technology over to cancer patients. I talked about that last year. What's the baseline? Baseline is people are getting these brain tumors and are dying. You have a standard of care, which is an average sort of treatment, same for everybody. So what is the baseline? What does it mean to be better than that? Backing back from that, how much detail do you need to put in? How many of these different data sources do you need to actually seamlessly integrate? What models do you need? How much confidence? So I think even in your question, the notion of minimally viable is actually a very deep question. And then, in terms of then from here to there, with this one, the commissioner came to us with particular questions about these pathways, because they could do, using R or whatever they were using, their Excel spreadsheets, they could do some analysis on the data sets when they looked at a snapshot in time of the educational data. What they could not do was anything that involved a longitudinal sort of dynamic nature. And so we went straight in for that, which actually was probably very, very complex. It would have been easier for us to build a digital twin without worrying about it was more static. So yeah, I mean, there is no sort of single answer to your question. Now, it depends. But let me just say one last thing, that this is where I actually think the advances in AI could really, really, really help, right? The ability to
I wanted to ask
ingest text.
what Jeff said about, imagine that I am a policymaker and I have come across you and I have absolutely limited knowledge or zero. And you say that you spend 6 months only to do the abstraction, the foundation, and say, okay, how do I put the graphs here and there? And I say, why should I pay $100,000? I ask an AI they're just blurbs here and there.
Did an AI do that at this point? You say 6 months, but you have to remember of that 6 months.
I'm not disputing
a whole lot of it is figuring out like which which data files do you need to open, and what all these columns mean, because some of it's documented, but it's documented in 1,000 places. Even in AI, you would, that sort of data cleaning part of it before you could even feed into the AI. Yeah.
To say, okay, I am just a policymaker, say, hey, AI does everything. It's a magic wand. Why I do this? I just do the prompt and let's make it happen.
Yeah.
How would you respond to say, okay, how reliable is that knowledge base, that graph? And is that a debate worth having?
Policymaker came to me with that. I don't know. I would probably take the tack to say, if you want to use this magic AI thing, which, by the way, in case you don't know, I'm rather a skeptic of many of these things, but if you want to use this magic AI thing, we've got to get your data sorted out first.
Mm.
And getting the data sorted out, by the way, is where probably 90% of that 6 to 12 months resided. Yeah, okay, the question of how to actually formulate the graph and everything, that sort of intellectual work was difficult, but it actually was more about getting the data sorted out. So maybe we use the promise, the lure of AI as a way, and now I'm talking about the educational domain, right, where I think that there is a real issue in the way that data are collected, stored, even thought about. So we use it as a lure to get the data sorted out. Once the data is sorted out, there's a whole lot of things, including AI, but other things that will become more feasible, including building these graphs and then sitting the digital twins on top. I don't know.
Any other question to follow? If not, please join me saying thank you, Sarah, for that.